Nobody screamed when the doors exploded inward. The students of Class 7B had trained for emergencies. They knew panic killed faster than any weapon. But when Warlord Dravik stepped through the smoke, even the bravest among them forgot how to breathe. He stood 9 feet tall. His scales were the color of dried blood, covered in scars that told stories of conquered worlds. Behind him marched 12 warriors in black armor, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city block. The combat instructor, a Kesari veteran named Old Baris, moved to intercept them. One of the guards knocked him aside like he weighed nothing. Dravik surveyed the room with yellow eyes. 30 students from 20 different species stared back at him. Valani crystalline beings huddled together, their glass-like bodies trembling. Massive Hurathi herbivores lowered their horned heads in submission. Even the proud Kisari warriors in the back row looked away. "I am Warlord Dravik of the Iron Scale Dominion," he announced. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I come with an offer." He smiled, showing rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. "Any student who defeats one of my warriors in single combat earns a place in my elite forces. Your species gains protected status. Your worlds remain free." He let that sink in. Those who refuse to fight, or those who lose, will have their homeworlds marked for harvest. Your resources become Dominion property. Your people become Dominion labor. The Valani student named Pell made a sound like breaking glass. His species was fragile. Under Dominion mining operations, they would be sold as decorations, living crystals for wealthy collectors. "So," Dravik continued, "who wishes to earn their people's freedom?" Silence. The Kesari warriors had fought the Dominion before. They had lost. The Hurathi were pacifists who had never raised a weapon in their species' history. The Tessari were strong, but not stupid. Everyone knew the iron scale reputation. Dravik's smile widened. "No one? How disappointing. Perhaps the galaxy has grown soft in my absence. I'll fight." The voice came from the back corner. Small, quiet, but clear. Every head turned. Every eye focused on the speaker. Annie Walsh stood up from her seat. She was 19 years old, 5'6", with red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was the only human in the class. Humans were newcomers to galactic society. Their technology was primitive. Their bodies were weak. They were classified as a class, 7 species, barely above bacteria on the developmental scale. Dravik stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of a predator amused by its prey. A human. He turned to his guards, who joined his laughter. "The weakest species in known space wishes to challenge the Dominion." Annie walked down the aisle between desks. Her classmates watched her with a mixture of horror and confusion. Pell reached out a crystalline hand to stop her, but she gently pushed it aside. She stopped 10 feet from the warlord. She had to crane her neck to look at his face. "I said I'll fight," she repeated, "but not one of your guards." Dravik's laughter faded slightly. "Oh, then who? You're strongest." The room went completely silent. Even the warlord's guards stopped chuckling. Dravik leaned down, bringing his scarred face closer to hers. His breath smelled like copper and smoke. "My strongest warrior is my daughter, Sereth. She has fought 200 combat trials. She has never lost. She has killed beings 10 times your size with her bare claws." His eyes narrowed. "She would break you in seconds, little human." And he did not step back, did not look away. "Then it should be easy for her." Old Baris had pulled himself up from the floor. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. "Walsh, don't do this. You don't understand what you're asking for." "I understand perfectly," Annie said, still looking at Dravik. "If nobody fights, Pell's people get sold as jewelry. The Hurathi become slaves. Every species in this room loses their home." She tilted her head slightly. "Someone has to stand up. Might as well be me." Dravik studied her for a long moment. His yellow eyes moved across her small frame, her soft skin, her fragile human bones. He was trying to understand her, trying to find the trick, the hidden weapon, the secret that made her so confident that he found nothing. Just a young human woman with steady hands and stubborn eyes. "You have courage, little creature," he said finally. courage or ignorance. We shall see which. He straightened to his full height. The combat will take place tomorrow at midday in the main arena. My daughter will be informed of your challenge. He turned to leave, then paused. What is your name, human? Annie Walsh. From Ireland. Earth. Dravik nodded slowly. Annie Walsh from Ireland. Earth. I will remember that name. His smile returned, cold and sharp. For the few hours you have left to carry it. The warlord and his guards marched out through the ruined doors. The smoke slowly cleared. The class remained frozen in shocked silence. Old Boris limped over to Annie. His face was grim. Do you have any idea what you just did? Annie watched the empty doorway where Dravik had disappeared. Yeah, she said quietly. I picked a fight I can't win. She turned to look at Pell, at the terrified Villani who had helped her with homework, who had shared meals with her, who had become her friend in this strange place far from home. But I couldn't just sit there and watch. Tomorrow, she would face the undefeated champion of the Ironscale Dominion. Tomorrow, she would probably die. But tonight, for the first time since Dravik entered the room, Pell had stopped shaking. That was enough. The betting pools opened within an hour. Annie's odds of survival sat at 1 in 500. Some students bet on how long she would last. The most optimistic guess was 30 seconds in her small dormitory room. Annie sat on the floor and stretched. Her roommate, a four-armed Tessari named Brill, watched her with all four eyes wide with worry. You need to withdraw, Brill said. Nobody would blame you. The warlord probably expected you to back down anyway. It was brave what you did, but brave and dead is still dead. Annie touched her toes, held the position, and breathed slowly. Can't withdraw. If I do, every species in that classroom gets marked for harvest. But you'll die. Maybe. Annie switched to the other leg. Probably. But I've been in fights before. Brill made a frustrated clicking sound. This isn't a fight. This is execution. Sereth has killed things that could eat you for breakfast. Her claws can cut through ship armor. She has 4 arms, each one stronger than your entire body. Annie looked up at her friend. Tell me about her. Everything you know. Brill hesitated, then sighed. If the human was determined to die, at least she could die informed. Sereth is the warlord's only child. She was bred for combat, trained since birth. The Ironscale have this nerve cluster under their 3rd arm. It's the only weak point in their body. But nobody ever gets close enough to hit it. Brill's voice dropped. She enjoys killing Annie. She's not just good at it. She likes it. Annie nodded and filed away the information about the nerve cluster. It was something. Not much, but something. A knock came at the door. Old Boris entered without waiting for permission. His head wound had been bandaged, but his expression was even more injured. Walsh, we need to talk. He sat heavily on Brill's bed. The old Kesari warrior had seen more battles than Annie had seen birthdays. His fur was gray, his left eye was blind from an old wound, and he moved like someone whose body had been broken and rebuilt too many times. Do you understand what humans are to the galaxy? He asked. Newcomers. Primitives. Class 7 species. Exactly. Your people have been in space for less than a century. You have no military presence, no advanced weapons. Your bodies are fragile, your lifespans are short, and your homeworld is so mild it barely registers as habitable. He leaned forward. The Ironscale are class 2. They evolved on a planet with 3 times Earth's gravity. Their hide can stop bullets. They see in infrared. They are everything your species is not. Annie finished stretching and stood up. My planet has sharks, crocodiles, box jellyfish, mosquitoes that kill 1 million people every year. We invented nuclear weapons and used them on ourselves. Twice. She met his blind eye and his good one equally. We domesticated wolves by being scarier than wolves. We hunted mammoths to extinction with pointy sticks. Earth isn't mild. We just won. Boris stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. I was hoping you'd say something like that. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small data chip. Serates combat recording. All 200 fights. Study them tonight. Look for patterns. Annie took the chip. Why are you helping me? Because I've seen what the Dominion does to harvested worlds. Because I'm tired of watching students die for politics. He stood to leave. And because you reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. Sometimes the smallest fighter hits the hardest. After he left, Annie plugged the chip into her display screen. For the next 6 hours, she watched Sereth kill. Again and again. Opponents of every species, every size, every fighting style. The Warlord's daughter moved like liquid death, her 4 arms working in perfect coordination, her strikes precise and brutal. But Annie wasn't watching to be scared. She was watching to learn. Somewhere around the 100th recording, she noticed something. Sereth favored her upper right arm for killing blows. When she committed to a finishing strike, she leaned slightly forward, putting her weight on her front L, e.g. T wasn't much. A fraction of a second. A tiny gap in otherwise perfect form, but it was there. Around midnight, another knock came. This time it was Pell, the young Villani. His crystalline body caught the light as he entered, making tiny rainbows dance across the walls. Annie. His voice was like wind chimes. Please don't do this. Not for me. Not for any of us. Your life is worth more than our homeworlds. Annie pulled him into a hug. He was cool to the touch, his surface smooth like glass. No, it isn't, she said softly. That's the point, Pell. Nobody's life is worth more than anyone else's. That's why we fight. That's why we stand up. She released him and smiled. Besides, I've got a plan. What plan? I can't beat her in strength. Can't beat her in speed. Can't beat her in skill. Annie's smile turned sharp. So I'm going to beat her in stubbornness. I'm going to make it cost her. Make her work for every inch. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll find an opening. Pell's light dimmed with sadness. And if you're not lucky? Annie looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth spun on its axis. Her family slept peacefully, unaware their daughter was about to fight for her life. Then I'll die on my feet, she said, fighting for something that matters. The night passed slowly. Dawn came too fast. And in her chambers on her father's warship, Sereth finished reading the files on Earth. On human history. On their wars, their famines, their plagues, their endless stubborn survival. She closed the files and sat in the darkness. This species, she whispered to herself, they don't know how to stay dead. For the first time in 200 fights, she felt something she didn't recognize. It might have been respect. 12,000 beings filled the arena. They came from every corner of the station, from every species represented at the Academy. News drones hovered above, broadcasting to systems across the galaxy. The Warlord sat in his honor box, surrounded by guards and advisors who were already planning how to divide the resources of 20 newly harvested worlds. The arena floor was white stone, polished to a mirror shine. It would show blood beautifully. Annie entered through the Challenger's Gate. She wore simple training clothes, gray pants, white shirt, no armor because none existed in her size, no weapons because she had never trained with any. The crowd murmured. Some laughed. Most just stared in confusion. This was not a fighter. This was a sacrifice walking to the altar. Then Sereth entered. The Warlord's daughter stood 8 feet tall. Her arms rippled with muscle beneath crimson scales. Her eyes burned like molten gold. She wore ceremonial battle armor that had been worn by champions for 1,000 years, and she carried a plasma lance that had ended rebellions. The crowd roared. Fear and admiration mixed together in their voices. This was what power looked like. This was what death wore when it came for you. Sereth crossed the arena floor with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall echoed like a drumbeat. She stopped 10 feet from Annie and looked down at the human with an expression Annie couldn't read. You came, Sereth said. Her voice was deeper than her father's, rougher, like stones grinding together. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you wouldn't. Sereth tilted her head. I read about your world, your species. I know what you're trying to do. Then you know I can't back down. Sereth nodded slowly. I know. That's what makes this tragic. The arena announced her call for the traditional bow. Sereth offered a shallow nod, the minimum respect for a doomed opponent. Annie bowed deeply. Formally, she held it for 3 full seconds. It was the bow of a student to a master. The bow you gave to someone who had something to teach you. It confused everyone. Even Sereth, The bell rang. The fight began. Sarah struck with her plasma lance. The weapon hummed through the air fast enough to leave after images. Annie moved. The blade missed her by inches, close enough to singe her hair. Sarah struck again. 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 Annie dodged. She didn't try to block because she wasn't stupid enough to try. She was smaller, faster. She had been dodging older brothers and bigger kids since she could walk. Her body knew how to not be where danger was. The crowd leaned forward. The human was still alive. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Sarah's strikes came faster. Her forearms worked in combinations that should have been impossible to avoid. Annie twisted, ducked, rolled, jumped. Her breath came in sharp gasps. Sweat poured down her face. Then Sarah's lower left claw caught her shoulder. The arena went silent. Annie stumbled back, her hand pressed against the wound. Blood poured between her fingers. Red blood, brighter red than any species in the arena had ever seen. It splashed across the white stone floor like spilled paint. Sarah moved in for the kill. Annie dropped low. Under Sarah's guard, under her reaching claws. She drove her elbow into the nerve cluster beneath Sarah's third arm, exactly where Brill had described, exactly where she had seen vulnerability in the recordings that Sarah's arm went numb. The plasma lance clattered from suddenly useless fingers. The Warlord's daughter staggered backward, her golden eyes wide with shock. The crowd erupted. 12,000 voices screamed. Some in disbelief, some in excitement, some in terror. The human had drawn first meaningful contact. The human had found a weakness. The human had come to fight. Sarah looked at her numb arm. Then at the bleeding human who should have been dead 3 times over. Something changed in her expression. Something that might have been interest. Good, Sarah said. And for the first time in her life, she smiled at an opponent. I was hoping you'd be interesting. She dropped into a fighting stance, abandoning her lance. Her arms spread wide, claws extended. She would do this the old way. The real way. Annie raised her fists. Blood ran down her arm and dripped from her elbow. The wound was deep. She could feel bone exposed to air. The pain was incredible. She didn't care. Come on then, Annie said. Her voice was steady. Show me what you've got. They came together in a blur of movement. Sarah's claws raked across Annie's ribs. Annie's fist connected with Sarah's jaw. More blood sprayed. Scales cracked. Neither of them backed away. In his honor box. Warlord Dravik leaned forward. His daughter was actually fighting. Not executing. Not playing. Fighting. Against a human. The battle continued. 1 minute. 2. 3. Annie was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, where Sarah had torn the muscle. Every breath sent fire through her broken ribs, but she was still standing, still moving, still fighting. And in her mind, her father's voice echoed from 100 training sessions on their farm in Ireland. Everyone has a pattern, Annie. Everyone commits too much when they go for the finish. You wait. You watch. You take the punishment. And when they think they've won, that's when you strike. She was waiting. She was watching. And somewhere in the future, very soon now, Sarah was going to overcommit. Annie just had to survive until then. 5 minutes into the fight, the Academy's chief medical officer stopped taking notes. Her hands were shaking too badly to write. Dr. Vesra had studied hundreds of species. She understood their biology, their limits, their breaking points. She knew exactly how much damage a body could take before it stopped functioning. The human had passed that limit 4 minutes ago. Annie Walsh was still fighting. Her left arm was useless, torn muscle hanging loose beneath shredded skin. 3 ribs were broken. 1 eye was swelling shut from a blow that should have cracked her skull. Blood covered so much of her body that her original skin color was impossible to guess, and she was still fighting. Sarah circled her opponent with growing frustration. Every trick she knew, every technique she had mastered, every killing combination that had ended champions and warriors and monsters. The human survived them, not blocked them, not countered them, survived them, took the damage and kept coming. Why won't you fall? Sarah demanded. Annie spat blood onto the white stone floor. Haven't finished yet. She moved in again. Slow now, clumsy, but still moving. Her right fist swung towards Sereth's face. Sereth caught it easily, her claws wrapping around Annie's hand like a cage. She could have crushed it. Ended the fight right there. Instead, she pushed Annie back and waited. "Your body is failing," Sereth said. "I can hear your heart struggling. Your lungs are filling with fluid. You have minutes, maybe less, before you collapse." Her voice held something strange, something almost like confusion. "Why do you keep getting up?" Annie swayed on her feet. The arena was spinning around her. Every nerve in her body screamed to her to stop, to fall, to surrender. Pain was not a feeling anymore. Pain was everything she was. "Because," she said through broken teeth, "if I stop, they mark my friends for harvest. The Villani kid who helped me with homework becomes a decoration. The Hurathi who never hurt anyone become slaves." She raised her ruined fists again. "Sometimes you fight because you can win. Sometimes you fight because it's right." In the stands, the Academy students watched in horrified silence. They had come expecting an execution. They were witnessing something else entirely. The Kesari warriors who had lost their border colonies to the Dominion stood from their seats. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They simply stood, showing respect in the old way. One by one, other species joined them. The Tessari, the Hurathi, even the fragile Villani, their crystal bodies catching the arena lights like a field of stars. Only the Warlord's delegation remained seated. Dravik watched his daughter with narrowed eyes. Something was wrong. Sereth should have ended this long ago. She should have been standing over a corpse, not circling a half-dead human like she was afraid to finish the job. "What are you doing?" he muttered. "End her." But Sereth wasn't listening. She was thinking about the file she had read. Human endurance. Persistence hunting. The way their species had chased prey across continents. Not through speed, but through pure stubborn refusal to stop. They didn't have pain limiters like most species. They felt everything. Every wound, every break, every tear. And they kept going anyway. Evolution on Earth wasn't about avoiding damage. It was about functioning through it. Sereth attacked again. A combination of strikes that would have killed anything else. Annie took two of them, dodged the third, and landed a weak punch against Sereth's ribs that it shouldn't have hurt. Compared to Sereth's power, it was nothing, but it landed. The crowd gasped. Sereth pulled back, actually pulled back, and looked at the human with something new in her golden eyes. Not anger, not contempt, fear, not fear of Annie's strength. Fear of what Annie represented. Fear of something that simply would not stop, no matter what you did to it. Fear of a species that had crawled out of mud and blood and endless darkness to conquer their entire world through sheer stubborn will. "You're going to die," Sereth said. "Probably," Annie agreed. Her voice was barely a whisper now. But not yet. She attacked. One last charge. Everything she had left. Her fist aimed at Sereth's temple, the one spot where even iron scale bone was thin. Sereth saw it coming. She moved to counter. Her upper right arm swept forward in a killing blow, and she leaned forward. Just slightly. Just for a fraction of a second. Just like she had in every finishing strike Annie had watched in those 200 recordings. Annie dropped her attack. She twisted sideways. Sereth's blow passed over her head by inches, and Annie's fist, her broken, bleeding, human fist, connected with Sereth's temple. The crack echoed through the silent arena. Sereth's head snapped sideways. Her golden eyes went wide with shock. Her legs buckled. The undefeated champion of the iron-scaled Dominion fell to one knee. 12,000 beings held their breath. Annie swayed above her fallen opponent. Blood dripped from her wounds. Her lungs rattled with every breath. She was dying. She could feel it. The darkness was coming for her, but she was still standing, and Sereth was on her knees. "Yield," Sereth said. Not a command, a request, almost a plea. "Please, yield. You've proven your point. You don't have to die for this." Annie looked down at the Warlord's daughter, at the warrior who had killed 200 opponents without ever losing, at the monster who had made the galaxy tremble. She raised her broken fists. No. Sereth had seen fear in every opponent she had ever faced. That moment when survival instinct overpowered pride. That instant when even the bravest warrior decided that living was more important than winning. She searched for it in Annie's eyes. The IT wasn't there. The human was afraid. Sareth could smell the terror pouring off her broken body. Her heart raced. Her muscles trembled. Every animal instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to hide, to survive. She ignored all of it. Why? Sareth asked. She remained on one knee, looking up at this impossible creature. You can't win. You must know you can't win. I could kill you with one hand tied behind my back. So why don't you stop? Annie's laugh turned into a cough. Blood sprayed from her lips. Because if I stop, you win. Your father marks every species in this academy for harvest. Hell gets sold as jewelry. Brill becomes a slave. 20 worlds burn, so your dominion can strip them for resources. She swayed but didn't fall. My planet spent centuries being colonized by people who thought they were stronger. We learned something important. What? You don't beat bullies by hiding. You beat them by standing up, by making them work for every inch, by making it cost them so much that next time they think twice. The words echoed through the arena. The news drones captured every syllable. Across 12 systems, billions of beings heard a dying human explain why she was dying. She wasn't fighting for victory. She wasn't fighting for glory. She was fighting because surrender meant her friends would suffer. In the stands, Pell's crystalline body chimed with a sound like weeping. Beside him, Brill clutched all four hands together and prayed to God she hadn't believed in since childhood. Sareth stood slowly. Her eyes never left Annie's face. I have killed 200 opponents, she said quietly. Qui savent champion? Hirathi warriors who broke their pacifist vows. Creatures from deathworlds that made the iron scale look gentle. She paused. None of them ever made me feel like this. Like what? Like I'm the one who should be ashamed. She turned her back on Annie. In iron scale culture, this was the ultimate gesture of dismissal. You only turned your back on someone who was beneath your notice. Someone who didn't matter. But Sareth wasn't facing Annie anymore. She was facing her father. Warlord Dravik leaned forward in his honor box. His yellow eyes narrowed with confusion. I withdraw from this combat, Sareth announced. Her voice carried across the silent arena. The human wins by forfeit. The crowd erupted. Screams of disbelief. Cheers of hope. The sound crashed against the walls like a wave against rocks that Dravik's claws dug into the arms of his chair. What are you doing? What you taught me to do, Sareth replied. Recognizing strength, honoring courage, protecting those who deserve protection. She looked at Annie over her shoulder. This human was willing to die for people she barely knows, for species that aren't her own, for a principle she believes in. Her voice hardened. That's not weakness, Father. That's the kind of strength our dominion was supposed to represent. Before we forgot what we were fighting for. Dravik's guards shifted nervously. They had never seen anyone speak to the warlord this way. His own daughter, no less. You would disgrace yourself, Dravik demanded. Disgrace our house? For a human. Sareth removed her ceremonial weapon from her back. She held it horizontally across both upper palms. In iron scale tradition, this was the gesture of offering allegiance. The pledge of a warrior to a worthy leader. She turned and offered it to Annie. I would follow someone who fights like this, Sareth said. Someone who stands when standing is impossible. Someone who bleeds for strangers. Her golden eyes met Annie's half-swollen gaze. You are the strongest opponent I have ever faced. Not because you can hurt me, because you can't be broken. Annie stared at the weapon, at the monster who had terrorized the galaxy, at the daughter of a warlord kneeling before a farm girl from Ireland. I don't want your service, Annie said. Her voice was barely audible. I don't want to be anyone's leader. Then what do you want? Annie's cracked lips formed something like a smile. I want your friendship, and I want your father to leave this academy without hurting anyone. Sareth's eyes widened. After everything the Dominion had threatened, after everything she had almost done to Annie's body, the human wanted friendship, not revenge, not submission, not power, friendship. Humans. Sarat whisperat. She laughed, and for the first time, it was a real laugh. Surprised. Delighted. Your species makes no sense at all. In the honor box, Dravik watched his daughter laugh with a bleeding human. His political advisors whispered urgently about damage control. His military officers calculated the cost of suppressing this footage. But the Warlord was doing different calculations that he was counting the eyes watching him. Billions of beings across the galaxy, seeing his champion bow to a human, seeing his daughter choose mercy over power. The Dominion had always justified its conquests as bringing strength to weakness. Here was strength, true strength, and it came from the weakest species in known space. Dravik stood slowly. His guards reached for their weapons. "Hold," he commanded. The arena fell silent. The Warlord descended from his box, step by heavy step, until he stood on the blood-stained floor of the arena. He walked toward the human who had ruined everything. Annie watched him come. She couldn't run, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything but stand and wait. Sareth moved between them, her claws raised. "Touch her," Sareth said, "and you fight me next." Father and daughter stared at each other. 200 years of history, blood and conquest and power. Dravik smiled. "I wasn't going to hurt her," he said. "I came to negotiate." Warlord Dravik had conquered 40 worlds. He had broken armies, shattered fleets, and made entire civilizations bend to his will. He did not negotiate. He demanded. He took. He won. But standing in that bloody arena, watching his daughter protect a half-dead human, he understood something he had forgotten long ago. Power came in many forms. "Negotiate," Annie repeated. She could barely stand. The world kept fading in and out around her. What could you possibly want to negotiate? Dravik studied her with those ancient yellow eyes. "I came here to find warriors, strong soldiers for my armies, beings who could fight." He paused. "I found something different." "Found what?" "I found someone who would die for strangers. Someone who stood against impossible odds because surrender meant others would suffer." His voice dropped. "I haven't seen that kind of strength in a very long time." He turned to address the arena. 12,000 beings stared down at him. The news drones captured every word. "The Dominion withdraws its harvest designations for all species represented at this academy," Dravik announced. His advisors in the honor box made strangled sounds of protest. He ignored them. "Not because we have been defeated, because we have been reminded. Strength is not merely in the claw. It is in the spirit that moves the claw." The crowd exploded. Cheers and tears and screams of relief. Pel's crystalline body rang like 1,000 bells. Brill fell to her knees and wept. Annie swayed. The darkness was closing in now. She had done what she needed to do. Her friends were safe. The academy was safe. She could finally let go. "Walsh." She looked up. Dravik stood directly in front of her. This close, she could see the ancient scars on his scales, the weight of centuries in his eyes. "You fight well," he said. "For a human." Annie's cracked lips formed a smile. "You should see my mother. She'd kick your tail." Dravik laughed. A real laugh, not the cruel sound from before. "Perhaps I will visit your world someday. It sounds fascinating. Bring snacks. We're big on hospitality." She collapsed. Medical teams rushed in. They swarmed around her broken body, stabilizing, sealing, pumping chemicals into her veins that made the pain retreat like a tide going out. The last thing Annie saw before the darkness took her was Sareth's face looking down at her. Those golden eyes were soft now. Concerned. "Rest," Sareth said. "You've done enough." Annie tried to respond. The words wouldn't come. She let the darkness take her. She woke 2 months later in a medical bay that smelled like flowers and clean sheets. Her body was whole again. The regeneration tanks had done their work. Even the scars were gone, though she found herself missing them a little. Brill was asleep in a chair beside her bed. Pel's crystalline form caught the light from the window, creating tiny rainbows across the walls, and Sareth sat cross-legged on the floor, reading something on a data pad. "You're awake," Sareth said without looking up. "How long?" 63 days. "You nearly died 4 times. The doctors kept saying humans weren't supposed to survive injuries like yours." She finally looked at Annie. "They clearly haven't studied your species properly." Annie sat up slowly. Her body felt strange. New, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. "Your father, gone." He honored his word. "No harvest designations." He's already back in Dominion space, probably conquering some other unfortunate world. Saratha's tone was light. I stayed. Here, at the academy, someone has to keep you out of trouble. Besides, she smiled, showing teeth that were definitely designed for tearing flesh. I've never had a friend before. It seemed like something worth learning. Over the following months, Annie and Sarath became a familiar sight around the academy. The massive iron-scale warrior and the small human woman. They argued constantly about food, about training, about whether Earth's oceans were actually impressive or just adequate. They ate lunch together every day. New students arrived at the academy. They came from all over the galaxy, from species Annie had never heard of. Some of them pointed and whispered when she walked by. A young Villani approached her one day, his crystalline body bright with curiosity. Is it true? He asked. Did you really fight the Warlord's daughter? Annie glanced at Sarath, who was pretending not to listen. Fought her. Lost technically. She was better than me in every way. But you changed the entire Dominion's policy. You saved 20 worlds. Annie shrugged. I just didn't give up. Sometimes that's enough. The young Villani stared at her with something like awe. Humans are strange. Yeah, we get that a lot. Later that night, Annie sat in her room and looked at the message on her screen. It was from her mother in Ireland. A video of the family farm. Her father waving from the tractor. Her brothers wrestling in the mud like they always did. And at the end, her mother's voice, steady and proud. We saw the footage, love. Your father cried, though he won't admit it. I always knew you had the Walsh stubbornness in you. Come home soon. We'll throw a proper party. Annie smiled. Across the courtyard, Sarath watched her through the window. The former terror of 12 systems. The undefeated champion. The monster who had found something better to be. She thought about strength. About what it really meant. About a small human who had taught her more in one fight than 200 victories ever had. The galaxy was big and old and full of powerful beings. But sometimes the smallest fighter hit the hardest, and sometimes the truest strength was simply refusing to stay down. The end.